Hello to viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Camera Tuesday, we're going to talk about Fujifilm X-S20. So let's dive deep into this puppy. Now XS is a series, basically 10 was the first, this one is the second one, and this camera series are generally classified as lightweight portable starter camera. Basically, what does that mean? That simply means these cameras are not designed with the daddy camera of everything. They are like just get you started, get you through the door of Fujifilm ecosystem. Because if you're buying an interchangeable lens camera, the first camera matters the most. If it is the most expensive one, there is a very good chance you're not gonna buy it. So every company, be it Sony, be it Canon, be it Nikon, be it Panasonic, all of them work their ass off to make one camera that is like the gateway drug. So this is the camera, and it has the same sensor as the previous generation of S10, but they turbocharge the processor. So they have X trans CMOS 4 sensor, and they have X processor 5. This is the new processor, so it does get a lot of horsepower, even more horsepower than the next generation sensor, simply because the next generation sensor they had, it's higher megapixel, as in like 36 megapixel. So it was overwhelming this puppy, this 5. So at 5, it's like basically having a lightweight chassis and powerful engine. So this is a very good combination, especially for a starter camera. It's really well optimized, so to say. And this puppy gives you 26 megapixel APS-C, BSI backside illuminated, and X-Trans. X-Trans is a unique ecosystem of basically Fuji semiconductor, where they are layering the bare array filter a bit differently. Does it make a difference? Not really. Like, really not really. It's one of those things that you can do double blind test all day long and you'll barely find it. So it's one of those things. Now it does have 7 stops of in-body image stabilization. Now does that mean you can actually do handheld photography of that level? No. That simply means when you are doing a video shoot, it's far more smoother, it's far more light. Because be mindful, the sensor only has a limited area of movement. If they designed it that it moves a lot more, it will get out of image circle. So for that reason, they have to design it with certain constraint. That constraint limits it at 7 stops of dynamic range. So that 7 stop is just pseudo rating. After like 2-3 stops of dynamic, it becomes pseudo ratings after that point. So do not expect like I'm gonna be like this and it's gonna be perfectly awesome. No, at best case scenario, you can do 24 frames per second. If you try to do video, I'm saying, let's say you want to shoot at 10 fps, you will find out that no, all the frames will be blurry, because 7 stop does not actually mean that level of stopping power, because again, the body is not going to resist your movement. So you have to understand the 7 stops sounds good, but it's one of those things that, like, Sony has 6 stops of in-body stabilization. Nah, it's one of those number. But does it mean it's good? Yes. Now it can do 20 fps burst. Now be mindful, the burst RAM is very small, so it cannot just go drrrr. It's more like drrrr, 2 seconds. And it does have lot of video formats and lot of option. Right now Canon used to be a camera company that has like, okay, this much horsepower we had, let's say we had 300 horsepower, we're gonna give you almost all 300 horsepower even on a cheap camera. Now their ecosystem is, we have 500 horsepower, but we are only gonna give you 150. They limits things now. While Fuji, looking at this opening in the market, they are like, we're gonna go all out, lot of format, lot of option. We are not gonna bottleneck you, we're not gonna triple hammer you, you go YOLO on it. And it does have single UHS 2 card slot. Now be mindful, that simply means this is not a professional camera. You're not supposed to use this anywhere where you can have a card failure and it can hurt you. For example, wedding shoot, you really cannot have a scenario where you have wedding shoot on single card. Now people do that, but there are 2 types of people. First, who have lost their cards. Second, who is gonna lose their card. There is no bit in between. So sooner or later you will understand and learn the hard way why every pro camera, be it from Sony, Nikon, Canon, Fuji, whatever have you, always have dual card slot. So be mindful, this is a good starter camera, but do not trust your livelihood on it, especially no sports event. So it's one of those things. It does have microphone input. On top of that, it also has headphone out, which is unique. Be mindful, Fuji did figure out a very clever way of doing that, is like using USB-C port, but this is a much better approach, simply because you can use USB-C for powering the camera. So if you're powering the camera using USB, you are no longer like, okay, I cannot hear it. Now that personally boils my blood. It's like this, all these camera companies forgot that they are beyond the 1990s now. It's like, we have Bluetooth technology, it has headphones, just saying this technology made in 1990 is awesome. Look into it. Like, you have Bluetooth, how about Bluetooth headphone? And don't say that it does not have syncing issue. It's perfectly fine. It was designed for real-time communication. It can handle that. And again, even if not, you're gonna do a video recording using the Bluetooth microphone, at least using it as a monitoring device should be more than sufficient enough. That really frustrates me. It's like, that's why I personally hate this. All camera companies, like, they never cross 1990s. So what were the 40s? 40s, I'm saying photos. Photos are basically, this is whether you love Fujifilm or it's like it does not matter to you. But for those who love Fujifilm, it has film simulation. There are 19 total modes. So those people who give a damn about it, they already bought the camera, the video has already over. So you have to understand, every camera has a RAW. That is just the sensor data. Now that sensor data is a binary digit. It's just like this value, so to say. So to read it, you need a interpreter. Now the interpreter is the quote unquote color science. Now how do you interpret it? That's up to you. You can, if you really want to, you can take your raw file into some different editors and you can change the interpreter. And if you change the interpreter, you can get a different output. And people do that. And especially many camera companies, especially there is a alternate to Lightroom. They are specifically focusing on that because they know that they can keep upgrading the interpreter. Even though you shot the raw photo, let's say an old camera of 2015, let's say, you can upgrade a better interpreter, let's say by 2025, use the same raw file, crunch the same raw file and get better resolution out of it, like actual perceivable resolution. So raw all camera is more or less same. The difference is that magic interpreter, like how do you crunch the numbers, because be mindful, we do not want scientifically accurate. If you want scientifically accurate, it's shut up and take my money. It's super easy. It's child's play. That's what NASA does and all that. It's super easy if you want scientifically accurate. We don't want that. We want it to be pleasing. So it's half science, half art. Now that's why no other camera company can do the film simulation, because Fuji actually spends time on it. Like their interpreter actually has a good layer and good absorption understanding how the heck film stock actually behaved, because they used to build it. They have a good data set, and their simulation is like, you take a photo, you post it in Instagram, you get Insta like. That's how good it is. Now for every other brand who tries to get that feel and all that, they never do that. First, because they are trying to be lazy. Second, they know like there is a very good chance they have some deep algorithm they developed for their film simulation department, who literally copy pasted that data from the actual film development. So it is really good. So out of the box JPEG experience of Fuji films are tangibly good. Like there is no communication. That's the sole reason why Fuji is such a beloved company. Like it's genuinely good. You're like, damn. Like you see all YouTubers with like, we have preset files and all that. That's what they have. Now it can give you 3 file formats: JPEG, old format, RAW, the independent format, but very incompatible. Basically, it's not compatible with anything. RAW, that's why RAW is just raw data. Then we have HIF file. Now this is interesting. More and more modern cameras are giving you HIF files. Why does that matter? If you have noticed that modern mobile phones are supporting HDR, high dynamic range. So HDR cannot be demonstrated in 8-bit. It's very limiting. So 8-bit has only 255 color steps, so to say. So red, it has to be between 0 and 255, and the same goes with green, same goes with blue. But if you go to 10-bit, now that puppy becomes 1024. It's exponentially more, and that's per channel, RGB. So the color you can create is bonkers. So for that reason, HDR requires a color space where even if your camera capturing it, the sensor can actually do that. That's not an issue. Sensor is like, bro, I got this. Sensor is not an issue. It's just like how the heck you package it. So back in the days, we did not have to worry about HDR, but now we do. So how do you package HDR file and give it to customer? HIF file. So that's why HIF file is important, especially for Apple ecosystem and flagship Androids. HIF, you will find that even in Android, HIF file is supported. It can do 4 to 10-bit. That's why, like, and you can do even basic level editing. If you are kind of guy who's like very precise in your camera shooting and you barely do minor touch-ups, you don't even need raw file. Like you will be happy with editing HIF files. So that's there. Now if you want speed, this is only 20 fps. So if you want speed, you can do a bit of crop and you can boost your speed to electronic curtain mode to around 30 fps. That's fast. And if you do lossless compressed raw file, that will give you 62. That's why specified. Even though speed is fast, the buffer chips are small, so they will fill up in 2 seconds, around 60. And if you do JPEGs, it's gonna give you 4 or 7 slots. So do not expect too much oomph out of it. It's like it's not that. It's like it's that kind of camera. So if you're trying to take sports of it, be mindful of that. Be light with the trigger, so to say. Now it has 2 functions where you have mechanical shutter 1/4000th of a second, which is good, and 1/32,000th of a second, that is for electronic shutter. You're like, why the heck anybody needs that? Well, come to India and have a lens that has full aperture. Try to shooting in broad daylight, outdoor scene. Trust me, you will be like, yeah, we need that. So it's one of those things, and that's why we have ND filter. Like, think about it. Like, we work our ass off to make our sensors as sensitive as possible, and then we put sunglasses on top of them. Outdoor sunlight has that potential. So how do you compensate for it? Either you use ND, but it's expensive, or you can use just electronic shutter. Slice that puppy. You slice that puppy as sharp as possible, and this also makes you very, very sharp. Like, there won't be any motion blur. So that's a good option. Like, this can be done on every camera. Like, it's an electronic function. It can be done. Camera company does not do that. That's why I said, like, Fuji is like going all out on this. So what about video? Now this is where I specified that I have Canon's old camera, basically Canon 800D DSLR, and back in that time Canon used to be like, hey, we're gonna give you all intra and GOP files. Now you have to understand, when you are shooting video, the file size would be God tier, meaning you need a server to store file, and I'm talking about full HD. Let's not even go to 4K or 8K. So that's a fundamental fact. So how do you deal with it? You compress that puppy. How do you compress it? So the best way to compress it, you take that reel, quote unquote, which has slices, each slice like 30 seconds in a second would be like 30 slices. So you take each of the slice and you compress that. That is what we call all intra. Now this is awesome format. Consequence, it's not very compact, as in like file size wise, it's not very compact, but it's super easy to edit. Why? Because when you take it to any video editor, when you have playhead, whenever it stops, it has a frame. It's like, okay, I'm rendering you this frame and I'm reading that frame. But if you use GOP, now GOP is very more efficient in terms of space, but it's a predictive algorithm. Basically, they take the slice, take one frame, take two frame, take three frame, yeet the second frame, calculate the difference between 1 and 3, use that third frame, basically the second frame they yeeted as a predictive model, and voila, all they have is a mathematical data set there. It's like frame, original frame, predictive data, original frame, predictive data, original frame. Now generally they throw away 2 frames per 3 frame, I think. So it's like 1, throw away 2, 1, throw away 2, 1. That's how they size. Very small. Consequence, if you ever shoot a water video and you're like, water just does not feel crisp, even though camera should be able to shoot in crisp, that's the reason. It's predictive algorithm. Now predictive algorithm is limited, so that's why no video shoot that is like serious and they are seriously planning to edit it or really want the best quality, you will always do all intra. Canon used to understand this. Now they are like, what if we def the customer? So they have removed all intra, even though their ancient camera has that, they removed it. That's why I said, like, Canon has become a bit different nowadays. So it has all intra and long GOP. So if you're like, hey, I just shoot and I throw away, have it. H.264 and H.265, those are the codecs. How do they crunch that puppy? So both of those puppies are supported. Now be mindful, if you do very high resolution or very high frame rate, you have to go to H.265, because otherwise that card would become the limiting factor. It won't be able to absorb the file. The write speed won't be fast enough. So if you do 6.2K 30 FPS open gate, now what does open gate means? Well, whenever you are shooting a video, most likely you are shooting in 16:9, basically this ratio, 16:9 ratio. However, the silicon, the actual silicon is never that basically size, so to say, is not, or their ratio. So what sensors are generally is replicating the old film era, so they have 3:2. So whenever you talk about open gate simply means you're gonna give that whole puppy, like whole sensor. You are not like, okay, I'm gonna throw away the top or bottom. It's like, nah, I'm gonna give you the whole puppy. And there is another benefit of that. Many times in movie industry, they use less compressor. Basically, you have a lens and you put a basically amorphic lens on top of it that crunches that puppy. So you want to utilize as much vertical resolution as possible. So for them, it's like, shut up and take my money, because they actually utilize it. So that's why open gate is actually desirable. And it gives you 4:2, so very good colors, and 10-bit, really good bit depth, and 360 Mbps. Now be mindful, this is the reason why they cannot give you H.264 at 6.2K. It will become 600 if they did that. So they need high efficiency compression. Benefit, file size. Side effect, your computer really needs to be powerful in order to handle H.265. If you have H.265 hardware supported, as in like the hardware level encoding and decoding chip, you're good. If not, you dead. So that's how it starts. Now on top of that, I'm genuinely shocked that, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, but I have checked, to my knowledge, this is the first camera that can act as a webcam, as a 4K 60 FPS webcam. All other camera I've seen, they go to 15 FPS if you try to 4K, and like they can barely do 60 FPS in full HD. This puppy is like 4K 60 FPS, shut up and take my money. And I'm like, damn, that's good. Now, like, no streaming service or video calling services use that. That's not the point. Especially for streaming, that's genuinely not the point. If you are capturing a true 4K, that's a much easier time for a basically background removal algorithm to remove the background, and then you create a clean feed, alpha feed of yourself, then you squash it down, then you send it to Twitch. That's far more desirable. So having this, that simply means you genuinely have very little reason to buy the HDMI capture cards. So that's really good. And be mindful, it has micro HDMI, meaning that puppy is 100% useless. You're gonna plug in, you're gonna move about, and poof, it's gonna break. So USB-C is far more durable as a port. So that's awesome. Now it's a small camera, so be mindful. What does that mean? That simply means it's gonna overheat. No matter what you do, it's gonna overheat. And it's gonna overheat in Europe. In India, it's gonna get poof, out of existence. Like, we have very high ambient temperature. So what about if you want to buy in India? You should really invest a bit of money on fan 001. That's a external hardware that allows them to put a fan there. Now if you're shooting indoors, or you're shooting mostly at night, or in winters, or in hilly areas, it should work, but be mindful, this is a very small body, and I don't think they put a heat sink as a proper design goal, because even though the body is magnesium body, so magnesium alloys should allow to dissipate heat. So I don't think they have a connection, thermal pad connection from the processor to the chassis. It cannot dump their heat efficiently enough. So even though there is no recording limit, there is a thermal limit, meaning if it reaches that hot temperature, it's like nope. So if you are using indoor air condition, enjoy. If you are doing an outdoor in India, buy the goddamn fan module and do not complain about that it's not running. So that's what they're on top of that. That's like okay, but you may be like, hey, 10-bit is good, but what if I had 12-bit? Or 422 is good, but what if I had 444? You know, it's one of those things. Or you may be like, dude, H.265 is just gibberish. I do not want to, and no professional touches that. That's a compressed format. You want something that gives you a bit more love. So you may be like, hey, I want Blackmagic love. Or you may be like, hey, I'm Apple guy, I like ProRes Magic love. So you can do that. It has raw HDMI output which supports both codecs. So your Atmos Ninja Pro can truly encode that puppy properly. So that's a really desirable thing. You cannot just take any HDMI feed and encode them into these things. It will lose all the detail. So that detail has to be transmitted through HDMI. If that detail is not there, yeah, you will have a file that will say ProRes file, but you try to edit anything into it, it's like, it will just guess, because it won't have the data. So camera needs to send that data. It needs to send that raw data stream that before compression. So this camera can do that. So even though you can see that option like HDMI capture on any other equipment, do not expect it to work that way. You do need like a camera to truly send it. Only then you have a raw video editing experience. So for a tiny camera, for a tiny price, that's like shut up, take money. So what about some paradox here? Well, Canon in recent times have started to offer some really good offering for similar sort of price. Not exactly price to price, but very close to it. Now be mindful, as of time of shooting this video, I have not received the actual price of Fujifilm in India. And even in they have not released the manual of this puppy. I tried to search into Fujifilm website, I did not find it. It was not released. By the time you are watching the video, there is a good chance it would have been released, but it was not available. So I'm assuming it will be similar price to R8. Now R8 is available in India, so I know it's 1,60,000 rupees. Now this is supposed to be 1 lakh, but it's supposed to be 1 lakh in Europe. I'm pretty sure by the time it comes to India, it will be closer to this puppy. So if this puppy becomes like, let's say, very close to this, then these two are actually competitive. Now, is there a reason to go into R8? Well, it has far less video features, let that be very clear. But in terms of raw horsepower, quality horsepower, it has two things that are up its sleeve. First, this puppy is full frame, meaning once you really want to flex, like I have shallow background, this will be like, I cannot compete. Flat out, you have that option. On top of that, it has better autofocus, flat out. There is only two camera company that can do truly good, awesome autofocus. That is Sony and Canon. And Nikon is catching up, but they are catching up from front end, as in like their flagships can do that, but like most people cannot afford flagships. So what the hell? So is Fuji good? Yes, really good. But is it like shut up, take money? Good if you need autofocus? No, that's still Canon or Sony. So these two cameras are surprisingly close when you realistically look about it. Even when I'm collecting with body only. And if you are one of those individuals who do not have a habit of buying other lenses, you are like, I'm gonna buy this the end, this is a really good option. So you need to know yourself properly, your needs properly. Like for example, for many people, it's like, hey, those who publish their video on both platforms, which are horizontal and vertical, they may be like, I'm gonna shoot in basically 6.2K. I have a lot of resolution, vertical resolution also, and I'm gonna crop in 16:9. and I'm gonna crop in vertical 16:9 from the same footage. It's almost exactly how you can do that with GoPro, so, latest variant of GoPros, where it shoots a square video and you can crop however you need to. So for that reason, many people are like, shut up and take my money. I need that function. If you do not need that, and there is a very good chance majority of people will buy this and they're like 6.2K, look at the file size, nope. And like, I'm one of those. So you need to know yourself properly. If you know it, then you know what you need to buy in between these two things, and how much future scope do you really need. Because there is an issue. It's like, yeah, you can have like raw file, but you cannot add shallow depth of field, you cannot add better autofocus, you cannot add better lens ecosystem. These things you cannot add. So for many people, you're like, dude, I want that optical quality. Nikon, Canon may be a better solution there. Or for some people, it's like, dude, I'm happy with the lens selection that is available right now, go for this. But you need to know, you need to sit down and calculate which lenses you're gonna buy. Does this has the lenses that not only you are buying right now, not the lenses that you are, in your wish list. You need to see that. You need to see that, calculate it, then only you can make a basically educated judgment. Because both of these cameras are really good, and we want this. We want a world where we have options. We want a world where it's like, again, it does not have raw HDMI output, so it is a bit inferior. But in terms of sensor size, they're like, shut up and take my money. In terms of ecosystem, basically how many shops you have, how many repair centers you have, how many people who know and carry the batteries and ecosystem and all that, this is much higher. That for many people are like, shut up and take my money. So you have to understand, these are two very good options, and you can choose whichever you want and you will be happy. For video folks who are like, no, video, shut up and take my money, take this. For people who like bit more, like I do want bit more oomph to it, you may find this to be better. But again, be mindful, I have not found the actual price of this. That's why launch, I'm not talking about launch claim price, I'm talking the price that I can see in Amazon and with lens. So that's why these two are in the same way. People may compare it to R7, but R7 is like APS-C. At that point, it's not viable. At that point, shut up and take this. But at R8, it's an actual competition. It's like, because again, full frame does do things. That's why when you are talking about Endgame and Infinity War, they were shot in 65mm. They're like 35 is too small for us. When you're talking about, Oppenheimer, is like, even this is not big enough. There is a reason. There is a reason why you want a big ass sensor. So if you can choose between APS-C and big ass sensor, and you're not too limited by the limitation of this chassis, you may find this to be better. But if you're like, hey, it has to be light, I need to be able to carry it, and I like a lot more video function in body, shut up and take this. And I really like that they have nubbin there, so autofocus point selection is also awesome. So this was my presentation on basically Fujifilm X-S20. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me your disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free. And as always, thanks for watching.